I've got a wheel of fortune going round and round. Hello, everyone. Right, my apologies for the couple of minutes late there. Literally, with 30 seconds to go, the screen froze, and then I've tried all sorts of different connections, iPhones, and everything. So I'm now with you. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. It says I've just left the room, but I think that's on my phone. So hopefully Joe can give me the thumbs up and keep me going. Joe, you happy if I just launch straight into this evening's webinar?
Yes, absolutely. I'll just bring that up now, and then I will leave you to it. Just let me know when you want me to flick between slides, Andy.
That's great. Thanks very much. So, of course, it's part of the series that we're doing in collaboration with Base from FlightPad. So I'm Andy Perkins, the CEO of FlightPad. And importantly, what we're trying to do today and over the next sort of couple of months is to try and give you some of the tools to become that pilot that everyone wants to employ. If you could click onto the next slide, please, Joe. So in terms of who I am, just a reminder for anyone who's new on the call, I'm a trainer on the 777, and I've spent a good part of my commercial life helping people in terms of recruiting them and helping them make their way into aviation. So as a trainer, I've started off in gliding and worked my way up through the general aviation world, and then as an instructor there, carried on and was lucky enough to become a pilot through a BMI scholarship, and then from there joined British Airways, where I've been for about 15 years now. In terms of my commercial experience, 737 and 777 is where I've spent my commercial career so far. And the important bit is from this sort of sector is to look at the recruitment side of things. Through some charities and also commercially, I've spent around 10 to 15 years now in terms of selection and being involved in recruitment processes, and spent a couple of years helping British Airways with the direct entry pilot recruitment setup. In terms of today, we're going to talk about development plans, which was what we sort of ended on the last webinar. And what we're going to try and do, I just want to make sure that we iterate the fact that this is all about you, not about me. So as a result of that, we would really like you to use the chat function. So if you have anything that you would like me to address, or any questions, please pump them into the chat, and we'll do whatever we can to encourage the use of that all throughout the talk. And let's have a quick look there. Yeah, nothing yet. So, but as it's rightly been put there, please do put anything that you would like answered as a question in there, because I'd like this to be interactive and relevant to you. So we're going to talk about the development plan and how we maybe go around about doing that, and creating a framework for you to develop your skill sets. The important thing, once we've got that framework in place, is setting up a time plan as well and reviewing that. And then we'll have a look at what the next step might be on this journey in terms of how to become a highly employable pilot. So if we could click on one more. So a question to everyone to start off with is, how do you ensure your own continuous professional development? And I mean, there's a question there which actually can sort of help us there in terms of the change of licenses affecting the industry. So I'll come back to that question shortly. So how do you ensure continuous professional development? Maybe some of you could put some ideas or suggestions into the chat, and we can have a bit of a discussion around the things that you already do, as well as me maybe giving you some ideas of things that you can do to make sure that you end up maintaining your skill set and developing yourself accordingly. So the first thing to mention, and I'll come to one of the questions that has popped up, is that there's only one person that's really responsible for your professional development. Now, you might think in some guises that would be the company, but unfortunately it isn't. It falls entirely down to you. And actually it's down to yourself as to how much effort you put into your career and maintaining the standards that you set yourself that will set you apart from other people. And I think that's one of the things that can be very difficult, particularly once you've been involved in a commercial job doing a very similar sort of pattern of work for, say, a decade or more. It is very easy to maybe rest on your laurels slightly, get a little bit complacent, and just think, oh yeah, well, we've always done it like that. Everything's fine, I'll just keep doing what I've been doing. Well, there is a place for keeping doing what you're doing, but also there's a much bigger place for making sure that what you're doing is still relevant, is still the way that the operator that you're working for wants you to operate the equipment, and also any changes that have maybe come out. And actually, I think it does actually get a bit more difficult when you get slightly into your career to keep that continual development going. There's a lot of other distractions going on. Everything becomes very familiar, and actually that's why sometimes people will go for either a seat change or a different aircraft type if there's options within the company that they work for, because that really sort of helps give you that sort of development process. A couple of questions in terms of the sort of on the professional development side that have sort of been mentioned here. One is talking about, a question is, how do you feel about Brexit and EASA changes for licenses, and how will that affect the industry? Well, I think what it does is primarily it gives an awful lot of uncertainty. And I think it makes it very difficult in the current market. We've got, obviously, the pandemic has devastated our industry already. And we're all in a situation, even those who are fortunate enough to still be in jobs, that anything and anywhere is still at risk. Until we see a significant upturn in terms of the movement of people, I think all of us will be in a very precarious position. That's obviously a fairly depressing sort of mindset at this stage, but in terms of our professional development, that makes it all the more important. And I think what we've got to do there is, so for example, changes of licenses in terms of affecting the industry. I actually think what it will do is it will really make sure that the most equipped and the most determined will be the ones that remain engaged and employed at the forefront of our industry. So how do we go about sort of doing that? And then what I'll do is I'll come back to the next question, which is about being a new pilot with frozen ATPL. What do you do to make sure that you keep yourself at the forefront of being employable, particularly now that the number of UK airlines that employ new pilots are quite small, being the operators like Flybe and other small operators maybe have a full complement, and obviously some of them have ceased operations. I couldn't agree more, and I think it's really difficult. It's a real challenge. And excuse me a second. So I think having an EASA license is a very useful thing. So if you've already qualified and you've got an EASA license, I think that will open more doors to more opportunities around not just Europe, but around the world, whilst we go through that transition phase. And it's only an opinion, but my feeling is that actually we will see the CAA adopting fully the EASA regulations to start with, and after a short period of people flexing their muscles, probably a period of 3 to 6 months, I imagine that there will actually be some quite equitable sort of transfers of EASA and UK ATPL licenses, because the standards are very similar. We've always been actively engaged with all of EASA in terms of the working groups, and actually I think that will be reflected in our ability to hopefully share those common sort of licensing that we've enjoyed for the past sort of couple of decades nearly now, and I really hope that continues. Just coming sort of swiftly back onto how do we then ensure our continuous professional development. I think the important bit there is to actually start putting a plan together, and we'll come on to that shortly. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of ensuring non-technical skill development, has anyone got anything that they want to share in terms of that they do at the moment to make sure that they keep their sort of non-technical or pilot competency skills up to scratch whilst they're not flying? anyone got any thoughts that they maybe like to share? You can share it privately if you don't want anyone to see your name. I won't reveal names to anyone that posts anything privately, but just interested to hear what you think. So one of the key components, I think, is communication in this sort of situation. We've all been taught with the sort of EBT sort of training, so the evidence-based training, and that is obviously being rolled out across all of the major operators. And actually, the way that sort of embraces non-technical skills means it goes right to the core of everything we do. Now, workload management is obviously a key element, and as someone has very kindly put, yeah, working in teams is really key. So actually, in terms of ensuring your non-technical skills development, whatever role that you end up sort of taking for the next sort of year or two, if you're unfortunately outside of the industry, or if you're in the industry but maybe not as active as you once were, is to actually look for opportunities where you can practice those team skills and particularly the communication skills associated. Some of the areas that I see people falling down on, particularly in the training environment, are in relation to the way that they try and communicate a message in a stressful situation. So what I'd say there is maybe, and if you haven't got one to hand already, is either have a tablet or a phone to make some notes, or a piece of paper and a pen. And because in a moment we're going to start trying to map out a bit of a strategy or a plan for ourselves in terms of our development going forward. But if I just go back to that communication piece, I think one of the crucial elements to consider there is how you communicate with others. Do you naturally ask open questions, or do you tend to shut people down? Do you tend to explore all the different options and avenues before making a final decision? And actually, if you've not been in the flight deck recently, but you're still obviously trying to keep yourself minded to the way of the operation, when did you last run through a non-normal situation in your mind and run through what you would actually do in terms of communication with your colleagues, either in the flight deck or in the cabin, or even down in terms of the engineers on the ground? So all of those things, you think, well, yeah, okay, well, if I'm not in the cockpit, I can't really practice that. You're totally right. But I think what you have to do is you have to try and think about how you're going to get that message across. And actually, you can practice at home. Now, all I would say is obviously be very careful with how you practice at home. It can sometimes get the rest of the family a bit wound up if you start asking them lots and lots of open questions when they're just saying, "Would you like some toast?" Well, tell me about the benefits of me having toast right now. But you get the idea. There are things you could do, and if you do it in a controlled way, you can actually think of some situations where you're maybe, and one of my classics at the minute is choosing bathroom tiles, which I'm not very good at. So I have a real lack of skill in that area in terms of making sure that things match. But actually asking open questions to try and make sure that you explore the different avenues without upsetting the other half is quite a challenge. And actually, if you think about some of those examples, you can probably draw other home-based scenarios where you could actually practice some of those non-technical skills. The other thing you could do there in terms of that communication and asking open questions is actually to see if another member of the family would run through one of the different sort of options of maybe a problem on board, and just try and think of a conflict in the cabin and how you might actually go about dealing with that, because obviously those sort of skills are doing things. And someone's just put on, you're right, questioning your partner and flying are two different skill sets. Couldn't agree more. Yes, I think having all of those thoughts out loud and talking openly is really difficult. To sort of, some people really struggle with that. Others find it really quite easy to do. So it's a case of just working out how that kind of communication side might work. Other non-technical skills development. Actually, a lot of the roles that people have been taking during sort of lockdown and during sort of layoffs have allowed them into customer environments. And any environment where there's other people involved gives a great opportunity to try and think about how you approach a problem and how you're going to deal with it. Obviously, delegating tasks, trying to involve others to gain more information, all of those elements are really useful in terms of pulling together those non-technical skills for development. Thanks for the few thoughts there. That's very, very useful. And if we could go on to the next slide, please, Joe. Great. So it's obviously this is where we then get to what things to consider as to putting into your development plan. And this doesn't need to be a massive sort of 10-page document. I'm literally just thinking of jotting down a few ideas of what and how you feel you need to open up your non-technical skills in terms of a development plan. Now, technical skills is one element that you do actually need to put into your development plan. How are you going to keep on top of your technical skills during a potential layoff period, or if you're just in a period where you're doing a lot less flying? Now, flight simulators are obviously one really good way of getting a very practical application, and something that we're doing with FlightPad. If any of you would like to come along for some free sessions, we're doing a lot of online home-based flight simulator work, just running through FMAs, the sort of standard procedures on an RNAV approach, anything to do with the whole of the operation. So we'll start looking at some abnormal situations, some general air traffic sort of solutions in terms of dealing with difficult scenarios. And the idea is to try and do different things. So someone says they would love to do that. You'd be very welcome. If you just go on to the flightpad.co.uk homepage, there's a link right in front of you for the home simulator element, and we'd love to see you there. And all we're trying to do is just trying to find ways of encouraging people either into the industry and help them develop their skill sets, but also for anyone who's already qualified, it's really valuable to obviously get that time to look in detail at what elements you need to do. And what I mean by that is what you need to do to keep your skill sets fresh and relevant and ready to return to the flight deck in anger. So in terms of that, I would probably suggest that we now make a small list of what technical skills you feel you need to maintain. We did talk about last time that some people think that they're going to lose a lot of their manual handling skills. It's been shown from a lot of studies that actually that's one of the last things to go. The things that will really start to go are your scan flows and knowing what order to do things in. Excuse me, coughing away here. So what I would say is that you need to maybe make a list of your scan flows, your emergency procedures, and the standard SOPs. If you pull those elements together and just read them and just maybe read out some of them aloud, that actually will really help keep you much sharper in terms of what you do. In terms of the non-technical skills, I would try and set yourself a few goals, which may sound a bit contrite, but I think I would set some goals in terms of what you're doing in terms of team working and communication skills. And it may be that you have to develop some scenarios, and maybe that just that once a week you think about doing a different scenario. So what would I do in a depressurization? How would I manage that situation? And what would I do? Putting those into a little framework of different things that you do every week will just give you an amazing amount of insight, A, to yourself in terms of how you're handling it and areas that you maybe need to address, as well as giving you a bit of a structured framework as to all of the different elements of non-technical and technical skills that you need to keep sharp. If you're looking for a framework to base that around, if you find it sort of a little bit of a loss in terms of building anything from scratch yourself, then if you go on to the CAA website and look up the 1158 form. Now, if you type that into Google, it probably comes up. I would try it now, but with the technical problems I've had today, I don't want to knock you all off of the webinar. But if you look in there, just look for the CAA 1158 form, so the 1158, that will actually give you a bit of a breakdown of some of the elements that you would need to cover in terms of training details. And actually, by doing that, you'll then be able to pull out some of the things that you know you've done well previously and some of the areas where you maybe need some development. And what I'd suggest, if you pull those bits into the list, combine that with the list that we've just talked about in terms of scan flows, standard operating procedures, memory items on the aircraft type that you're on, that will give you a framework to work from. And then it's a case of not doing it all in one go, but just pulling off several of those items, having a look at them just for maybe half an hour to an hour a week, and then coming back and every month just having a review of what you've done so far. Because I think that will really help you develop your own techniques and give you a real plan as to how you're going to do that important thing, which is get that continual professional development going. So that will keep going. But also it means that when you actually come back, and if you're going for subsequent interviews or anything else, you are able to demonstrate to somebody that you've kept yourself engaged and kept yourself relevant. And that again is another reason that they should employ you as opposed to anyone else. And this is all on that journey of how to become the pilot that everyone wants to employ. At the end of the day, if you think of it from a business viewpoint, you want that pilot that takes care of their own skill sets, that looks after themselves and is engaged throughout, looking at how they can improve themselves. Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. That's great news. You've posted it there. And I think that's a real good way of getting that framework together to just give you that options of what to do. Thank you. If we go to the next slide. And so it's literally just what we've been talking about there. So what is your plan? Let's have a look. Let me see what this is. Right, there we go. What I'll do is I will answer that question that's just come through shortly, that I agree. What is your plan? So I think what I'd say with your plan at the moment is a lot of it depends on your experience level and the situation you find yourself in. If you are employed, obviously, I know most of us are going to just do our best to remain that way and just hope that everything continues sort of sufficiently to enable us to remain employed. If you're looking for employment, I think it's very difficult. You've got to look at how to cost effectively use what resources you have to make sure that you're ready to rejoin the industry as soon as possible. I think yes, there is some sort of a benefit in terms of getting into flight simulators and keeping yourself current in that way. There's obviously a cost involved with that, which might be prohibitive for some. Again, do let us know. We'll do whatever we can with the fixed base 737 sim that we've got based in Ealing, and also through the online flight simulator secrets idea. We're more than happy to just try and help you keep current during this difficult time. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. We're all aviators. We've all got to help each other as much as we can, and we can all buy beer when times are good. So just everyone, if you do need help and you're at a loss, do just drop us an email, and we'll happily do whatever we can to try and assist you to keep those skills going. I think the other bit which we alluded to and spoke about last time is the transferable skills. And actually, unless someone comes up with a different suggestion, that might be where we head in terms of next week's. Sorry, I don't think it's next week actually. I think it's the week after next. For the next webinar that we hold on this, is to maybe look at the transferable skills and how that can really help you develop as a pilot and be relevant. Because what is important is it doesn't actually matter what you do in this next 12 months in terms of say a new airline job. What is important is how you spend that time. So sorry, it's slightly counterintuitive as to what I said. In my head, it made sense. So it doesn't matter necessarily if you do things in aviation. What is important is what you do and how you do it. That's what I was trying to say. And what I mean by that is if you're in a role where you're working with lots of people, you're demonstrating an ability to evaluate information, to liaise with others, to get feedback, to work with other people to find a common goal and a solution. Those are all really relevant transferable skills. I'm more than happy to talk about those in the next webinar. So that might be the sort of thing. But before we go to any questions, if we just go to the next slide, please, Joe. I think what is important is, what do you want to discuss next? If there's any topic that you want us to cover in terms of pilot competencies, if you want a specific pilot competency covered, or if you want us to try and think more specifically in terms of some of the interview processes and some of the questions that might be asked and the types of process that are out there, we can go down there. So it's entirely up to you. But if there's no direct input on the chat this evening, what I'll do is I'll suggest that we'll look at transferable skills next time round. If we move on to questions now, Joe, I do have one question that has been posted privately. If you're happy, I'll head into that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before I do that, any comment from yourself, Joe? Anything else that sort of flagged up that you think I should include or have missed?
No, I think that was really good. I've written down a few summary points from what you've said. No, I think you've covered a lot there in terms of what people can do in this situation. Just a slight thing to add, I guess, for anybody who is on the webinar this evening that finds themselves in a situation where they've recently graduated and got their license, and now it's a case of, what do I do next? From my own personal experience, when I graduated in 2008, we were in the middle of the financial crash, and jobs were very hard to come by at that time. And myself and my colleagues were in the situation where we were looking to secure any position that we could. And it took a while longer, and it took a while to sort of recalibrate your brain to think, actually, this first officer position is not maybe necessarily going to come as quickly as I thought it was going to come. And one of the things that I found beneficial, and perhaps when things start opening up a little bit, is spending time around airfields, networking as much as you can, staying involved with the aviation community. It is like one big family, and it was actually only from socializing and networking and being around the airfield that I actually secured my first flying job. So just something to add to what Andy has said tonight, that's potentially another avenue that you want to explore, perhaps when we get slowly out of this COVID situation, and we can start doing things like actually seeing people again, which would be lovely. So yeah, it will come and things will recover. It's just getting to the point where you're managing your own expectations and doing whatever you can, like Andy said, just to stay current and keep your skills up to date.
Yeah, no, I think that's really sound advice, and anything you can do to keep yourself engaged with what's going on in and around aviation is really important, because that will really help keep everything going. In terms of the couple of questions that we have here, I think, questions during a job interview has been suggested by Adrian, and also how to prepare for psychometric testing. I think what I'll do is maybe on the next session then is if we don't talk about transferable skills, but what we'll do is we'll focus on what things are included in different selection processes. So selection processes will be what we cover on the next one, and then from there we can build into the transferable skills for the subsequent episode. So a couple of sort of specific questions, but what's my view of the recent video from Bauper, not to do flight training? Well, I agree that is, sorry, there's a little bit of noise in the background here. It's just bedtime for a couple of children. I had to move to a different location because my internet wasn't working. So in terms of Bauper's recent video, not to do flight training, I think there's a lot of people out there who have just recently trained. And actually, I mean, without coming to a personal opinion on that, I think the the bits to take out of it is that, yes, there is a desperate situation, and unfortunately a lot of people have already lost their jobs. And as Joe has just mentioned, it's going to be a very difficult market going forward. I think the bit that Balpo's maybe missed out or maybe not highlighted is the fact that whatever happens, there will be demand. Demand will come back, and I think if you're flexible and you maintain your skill set, there will be jobs out there. And I think one of the other bits that you've got to try and do is to look at the situation as a way of saying, right, what can I do to try and make sure that my skill set really develops over the next year or 2 years, so that when the jobs do come, I'm ready and able to do this. And although that's not comforting, it's still really challenging and really difficult. I think that's basically what I would suggest at the moment, is to just, unfortunately, we just have to carry on. And if you're in that situation, it's pretty uncomfortable, but we've just got to build on the reality of the situation and make sure that in the down period you spend as much time as possible getting your skills up to scratch, so that you are ready for whatever upturn comes. So I hope that answers that question. And I see someone else there in a holding pool for an interview with TUI and keeping themselves current. I think that's great. Anything you can do to keep current is a really good thing to do. But I must admit, yeah, those hold pools, they're just going to have to, it's going to be a real waiting game. But as Joe said, if you can keep networking and keep yourself engaged, then there's a real possibility of being able to react as soon as a position becomes available.
Great. There's a question now about psychometric test. Do you want to touch on the later one? Or? I
think so, yeah. So what I'll do is, in terms of preparing for psychometric tests and also the types of things that are used in terms of questions during selection processes, I think what would be best is to give that one the real gravitas that it deserves, is to actually dedicate the next one to that whole element of psychometric testing and sort of the way that interview processes and selection processes are constructed, because having that backing and knowledge will actually really help people be able to then apply that accordingly. And then there's another question, can we talk about networking? We can definitely link a little bit in there, and what I suggest though is that I think we've got two separate topics there. So one to talk about how to network effectively. And actually, because we're going into Christmas, it might be worth us deferring that one to the new year, because you won't get a lot of traction with people in the run up to Christmas, in my humble opinion, in terms of a new networking, because most people are preoccupied elsewhere. So if we can transfer that one into the new year, and I can't remember, Joe, have we got one more scheduled before Christmas?
We haven't. I've just had a look at it. Our next one is scheduled for the 5th of January.
Fine. Okay, so maybe in early January, what we'll do is we'll cover the two different topics with the next two webinars. So one on not just psychometric testing, but selection processes and a methodology. So the different things that are included in processes and why they're there, because that will then allow you to understand how you need to go away and prepare for those. And then subsequent to that, let's have a look at networking and how to make sure that you remain engaged with the industry. And hopefully by then we'll start to see some early shoots in terms of the new year. There should be a lot more drive around the different vaccines that are going to be out there, that we can really hopefully then start pushing that forward to try and help people engage in terms of different networks to better themselves and allow more opportunity.
Fantastic. Great. So has anybody got any final questions before we finish? Just wait a couple more seconds, just if anyone's got any further thoughts. Just while I wait, just to let people know, we are running weekly webinars at the moment. We cover different topics. Next week, we've got a nutritionist who's going to talk specifically about aviation nutrition. So it'll be at the same time next week. And then, of course, Andy will return with the next flight pad installment on the 5th of January. If you want to recap over any points, the webinar will be available on the website. on joinbase.co.uk tomorrow morning. We should have that available for you if you'd like to go over it, along with all of the other webinars that we've done so far. So if this is your first one and you missed the first, you can go back and rewatch the first one before the next instalment in the new year. And
the last thing I'd say is thank you, Joe, for organising this. I think it's great. It all seems to be going really well, so well done on that. And if anyone is interested on the flight simulator side, even if you don't have your own flight simulator at home, you could log in and watch, which may sound bizarre, but the idea is we've got professional pilots and also trainers that are helping people develop those skills and keep those skills current using flight simulators. So if you go to flightpad.co.uk, you can click on the link on the home screen there that will take you through and give you the details. But it's all free for the rest of this year. And certainly for anyone that's involved here, we just be really keen to make sure that we keep you engaged in the industry. So just talk to us and we'll make it all happen, I'm sure.
Perfect. And thank you, Michael. And thank you, Andy. Brilliant webinar again this evening.
Pleasure.
And we'll look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you all. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye now.
Bye-bye.